Hello, so we found out how many queens, rooks, and pawns it took to defeat Martin. So today, we're gonna find out how many bishops it takes to defeat this bot. Okay, so we're starting out here with 2 bishops because you do need at least 2 bishops of opposite colors to deliver checkmate. So we're gonna play bishop g2 here. Just put the bishops on the diagonals in case, Martin plays like b6 and blunders a pawn. So the next move we're gonna play is bishop b2. Again, as I said, just put the bishops on the diagonals. We do see the queen come out. That does attack the bishop. So I'm just gonna play bishop f2 and get the bishop out of danger. Okay, he does give a check with the queen. Unfortunately for him, that blunders his queen. So we're gonna take the queen. Okay, he does give another check with the bishop, and we can't take this, and blocking would just lose the bishop, so we're just gonna play maybe king e2. Let's play king e2. Okay, the knight comes out, and the knight can't go here, 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 or here, because this bishop covers all these squares nicely. So I'm just gonna take this free pawn that's on e5 with my dark squared bishop. Ooh, and the pawn gets pushed to c5. Nothing's blundered so far, well, apart from the queen, if you want to count that. So I'm just gonna move the bishop back and hope that we see another blunder. Yes, that's exactly what we wanted, bringing the knight back to g8, and now we can take the g7 pawn, and we're gonna be winning a rook. So we could take this rook, or we could take this knight. The knight is obviously less valuable than the rook, so we're gonna end up taking the rook. Okay, and the king moves forward to e7, and I believe just probably pulling the bishop back to g7 and looking to take the knight. Okay, so he does play bishop to d2. That does defend the knight, so I can't take with the bishop, but the bishop is undefended itself, so we're going to end up taking the bishop on d2. And the king moves forward. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So we're just going to take the knight for free, and so far we're actually not doing too bad. So what I'm going to do now is probably just bring the bishop back to e3 and attack the undefended pawn. Martin plays f7, king f7, so we're going to take the undefended pawn on c5. Okay, and then he plays e6, bringing the king back. So I ideally want him to play something like b6 so I can win the rook, but b6 would hit my bishop. So I'm going to bring my bishop all the way back to f3. And okay, he just moves his king to e5. So I'm just going to move my king up. He can go here, but I would just move the bishop back. So I'm going to go to king c3. Okay, the pawn gets pushed. And I'm going to play bishop e3 to try and attack this pawn. He does bring the knight out. This knight isn't too scary. There's not many squares it can go to that really pose a threat. So I'm going to take this free pawn on h6. Ooh, okay, and then he plays pawn to b6. This move by Martin, it does pin the knight to the rook, so the knight can't move, otherwise I take the rook. So, but this pawn is holding the knight together, so obviously I can't take because then it would just be a trade. So what I'm going to do here is probably just move the bishop back to like e3. Ooh, okay, and then the pawn gets pushed. So I'm going to bring the bishop back to e2 and attack the pawn. Okay, he does give a check with the pawn, and I obviously can't take it because the knight defends. But I can't go here because then this check, and even though it's a trade, I end up losing a bishop. Best case scenario, assuming Martin finds that, and it's just not very optimal. So I'm going to go to probably just move king to b2. Ooh, okay, so he does push the pawn that was defending the knight. So I'm just going to play bishop f3 and pin the knight. Okay, the pawn gets pushed, so now there's no longer a threat of taking this knight. So I'm just going to probably pull my bishops back, honestly. They're not really doing a whole lot much. And we get knight to a5, moving the knight to the edge of the board. So I think the best move for me here, actually I'm not quite sure of the best move, but from what I can see, bishop c5 looks pretty solid. It attacks the pawn. So I'm going to play bishop c5. Ooh, okay, the knight comes to b3. That's just a free knight, so we're going to end up taking it. And then the bishop comes to e6. If he does end up pushing this, it'll be a check. But if I just end up taking afterwards, maybe we can win the rook. I feel like just taking on b4 is also a pretty solid move, so let's just do that. Okay, the rook comes over to c8. This pawn is free, so I will just take it. And Martin swings the rook over to h8. Okay, so what I'm immediately noticing is that the rook is on the same diagonal as the king. So if we can get our bishop to d4 and give a check that skewers the king, we can pick up the rook. The problem is that my king is not guarding the d4 square. So we're going to move our king to c3, guard the d4 square, and then if he doesn't move the king or the rook, then we're able to win the rook, and we'll probably be able to win if we play this one carefully. Ooh, okay, so he doesn't do what I expected him to do, but he does something good nonetheless. Martin moves the rook over to b8. That's just a free rook, and it checks the king, so we're going to take there. And the king goes back to f6. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go king to d4, you know, preventing the pawn from being pushed. Martin plays f4. That allows us to just take that free pawn. The king comes down to f5, attacking our dark squared bishop. So what we're going to do is probably just pull the dark squared bishop back, or pull it forward. I'm trying to think of what the best move is. Probably just maybe something like just e5, because my king is on a dark square and he has a light squared bishop, so he can't attack me no matter what he does. And my king is in front of the pawn, so the pawn cannot push no matter what. So we're going to play bishop to e5. Ooh, okay, so he brings the bishop back to d7. If I take here, he's going to give a check, but I'll just move back to d4. So let's play that. Or I could take with the bishop. So let's take with the bishop instead. Bishop to d4, or sorry, d5. Ooh, okay. So Martin just played bishop to c6. So we're going to pick up this bishop. And now the question is, do I remember how to mate with a bishop, or sorry, with two opposite colored bishops and a king? I don't even think I remember, but I think I need to cut the king off somehow. So I'm going to play bishop e4 and maybe just bring the king down. Okay, so I guess we'll cut him off this way. Okay, he goes back. So we need him in the corner, I'm pretty sure. Okay, I may or may not have watched the video on how to checkmate with two bishops because I have no clue what I'm doing. So apparently I need to cut the king off or something like that. Okay, Martin goes down and we need to prevent him from going back to this side of the board. So we're going to play bishop g6, you know, cutting him off from the h5 square. He goes here and we need to prevent him from going back. So we're going to play bishop g5. He goes down. And apparently we need to get him with some crisscross applesauce. So we're going to go move the king to f2. And then I think it's bishop here, right? Yeah, and he only has one legal move. And then we check. And we get checkmate. So it only took two bishops to beat Martin. So that's pretty good.